Oh boy, am I hungry. I want fries, a hamburger. No, make that 2 fries. You want anything? What's your special today?
Episode 2. Welcome back to the Northwest Builders Lunch Hour. Today we are recording the second part in a 3-part series. We'll be talking with Luke Moerke and Chris Bzdel of Exodus Engineering. We're going to have a great conversation about what services Exodus Engineering provides and how you as a builder can come prepared to have the smoothest experience possible working with Exodus or any engineer that you're working with. So grab some lunch and enjoy. We're going to jump into some questions that I hope will bring some real value to you as a listener. And we're going to talk a bit about codes, online plans, prescriptive versus engineered plans, that sort of stuff. And yeah, Chris, let's go ahead and start with you. And let's talk about code challenges that are up and coming. What kind of things are builders going to need to look out for?
Yeah, so this one I'm going to try my best on. As Luke mentioned, Chris A. normally specializes more on the architectural side of things. So I've done a little bit of research into the energy code and what changes are going to be coming up for that. And what I've discovered was it appears that the energy code has not actually been fully adopted yet. So a lot of this stuff is still currently in limbo. So I've came across a lot of what needs to or what proposals have came up, but a lot of them have not actually been set in stone yet. Now the commercial side, that's all been finalized. The commercial code is out and available, but the residential code is still being drafted up. Now, a couple of the key changes that I was discussing with our drafter yesterday, it's not really 100% set in stone yet, but there will be of what it's going to be called. It's like a hybrid wall insulation. There's going to be insulation being required on the outside of the house as well as the internal wall cavity.
So, Washington State is really pushing energy efficiency, and this is all due to a court ruling that happened years ago, where they have to meet a certain reduction in They have to meet a reduction in energy usage by a certain year.
Right.
And they're mandated to do this by law. And unfortunately, unless our legislators were willing to change the law, which is not likely to happen, this is going to continue to be an issue. And this is why, talking about codes, there's lots of codes that are changing. The building code changes, but the energy code tends to be the biggest issue.
It's what I hear the most about, for sure.
Yes. So that's the biggest trigger for most builders these days. And the continuous insulation, I don't know that it's going to be required for every instance. What I do know is they're pushing towards that. The energy code typically requires a certain number of points in order for you to get a permit. You have to meet a certain number of points to be able to build your house. And the points are rated on different options. You have all these different options to choose in energy efficiency. And that comes to water heating, it comes to heating your house and HVAC, it comes to your windows and insulation and all the rest. And so certain combinations of those different options give you the ability to gain the points that you need to build. They are increasing the points slightly. It used to be the current code cycle requires 6 points, and that's based on anything over, I think, 1,500 square feet. So it's between 1,500 and maybe, I think it's 1,500 and 5,000.
Okay.
I might be wrong. It might be less than 5, but I think it's between 1,500 and 5,000 square feet. You need 6 points, and they're going to bump that up to 6.5. Not too big of a deal, but it's only going to get worse from here.
Right.
And there's going to be less payback in the options that you have to choose from as far as, this option is going to save me money in the long run.
Right.
That's less becoming the case because we've already done as much as we can. We've got all the low-hanging fruit. We've improved efficiency in our windows. We've improved efficiency in our wall insulation, and now the cost benefit ratio kind of goes down from here, unfortunately.
Right. I hear pretty regularly from builders that, all of the cheap points have already been used. And now we're getting into points that really drive up the cost of building a home.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, continuous insulation, I'm not sure that that's going to be a requirement, but I think they're adding that to the list of available points.
An option for a point.
Yeah.
But as they require more points, people might move to that.
I was actually down in Nevada a couple of weeks ago looking at some homes that were being built down there. These were engineered to utilize, every cost saving possible, including, sheathed walls that were only partially sheathed, only as much as they needed, and then using a stucco surface, and so they didn't even really need to hide the fact that the depth of the wall was changing. Put that foam on, float it out, it kind of disappears. But I'm guessing that that's similar to what you're talking about as far as the exterior insulation would be, that the foam that they're putting under the stucco to break the thermal bridge from the stud to the exterior.
It's really just a rigid foam that applies to the exterior of the building. It's oftentimes used in commercial construction when they don't want to put insulation in the stud cavity. And also oftentimes is used in the more modern flat or monoslope roofs, where you want an exposed interior, you want the structural system exposed, and oftentimes that would be like timber frame construction, exposed car decking. Well, the only way to get the insulation requirements in your ceiling, then you can't put it in the joist cavity, you got to put it above the roof sheathing.
Right.
And so that's typically done with rigid foam.
Yeah. Now, I've seen some other options recently. Some companies are making studs that are like a 2x2 on each side of the stud with a rigid foam center in it. I've seen studs that are actually, they look like little webbed floor trusses. They're like flat trusses with webbing in them to try and break up that thermal bridging.
Are they open webbing, or are they more like an I joist?
No, it's
column?
open webbing.
Open webbing.
Yeah. And then I've heard of people building staggered stud walls to break the thermal bridging.
Done that before.
Is this all to accomplish that same outcome as that exterior insulation would be? It's about breaking the thermal bridge.
It's about
essentially.
bridging. Yeah, it's really
okay.
about that bridge. It's whether or not you have solid framing, any contact of solid framing to solid framing from the outside to the inside of the wall.
Right.
If you break that solid connection of framing, then you're eliminating the bridge, you're increasing the efficiency
Right.
of the home at that point.
So I'm a truss guy. I know just enough about energy code to help my builders get it taken care of in the trusses. Can you run through just like you talked a little bit about like water heaters and windows and stuff like that. What's kind of the hierarchy of you start here, and then as you're working towards gaining those points, if you have to, this is the next step and the next step, as we're going from the low-hanging fruit to the more expensive things.
I'm not sure on
You
that.
want to take a shot at it? Oh,
I don't know that one.
okay. Well, in general, it tends to be the heating systems. The heating system, your HVAC system, is usually the lowest hanging fruit because the high efficiency units that you can get, the heat pumps that you can get, I think the cost on those units has come down because there's more competition. And so that's the lowest hanging fruit, is typically to use a high efficiency a heat pump system. There's not as much emphasis on the mini ductless units now, which is a little bit curious. I'm not sure why they lowered some of the points that are available for mini ductless. Kind of seemed like that was the way we were going. We were going all European, with all the ductless units, but the high efficiency energy heat pumps with the ducted insulation, with ducted units, seems to be still a good option when it comes to grabbing some energy points. They're just moving away from putting those ducts in places, obviously, that hurt efficiency, like the crawl space,
Right.
or the attic. And there are options to keep it in the attic as long as it's deeply insulated. So the
Right.
deep buried duct, most builders know what that is. And that's one of the options to gain some points if you have a ducted system, is to keep that ducting covered in insulation, that blow-in that we all love in the trusses.
Yeah.
And you can keep some points that way, but you have to insulate it. It has to be more efficient, which I think is great. I think keeping our heating systems, you're not blowing your air-conditioned 60-degree air through a 90 or 120 degree attic, and soaking up all that energy. So
Right.
I think that's actually a common sense thing to do. Most people have gone to heat pump hot water heaters. They gave, I think, 2 points for that option, and that has been another low-hanging fruit generally. But you have to be really careful about where you put those, because they can really affect the feel of a room. If you can keep them in the garage, then great, but they're not as efficient in the garage.
Yeah, I've heard of people having essentially heated garages because their water heater is conditioning that space.
Yeah, the problem is it really cools a room.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got it backwards there.
So if you have it, because it's taking energy right out of the air and it's heating the water,
Yeah.
so it actually will cool areas when they're in use. So I think the idea of having your heat system in the heated envelope makes a lot of sense. I know that there are some builders in the Northwest who actually have been doing that for years already.
Sure.
I think not everybody's in tune with that, and that actually affects our industry as well, because when people want a house, if you have to change the way that you design the home, and you have to allow space for those types of units if you're going to include that within the heated space. But I do think it makes a lot of sense, and it does increase the efficiency overall of your system.
Right.
I think the energy code is really, again, pushing kind of builders in that direction by the points that they're requiring.
Right. Okay.
So
So one of the things you're talking about, the hot water heaters, one of the things I came across is that actually heat pump hot water heaters are now going to be a requirement unless you meet some of the exemptions that are in there. But that is one of the new requirements, that heat pump water heaters will be required across the board. And a couple other things that popped up was a smart thermostat is good for 0.5 credits.
No kidding.
So that's a new one. That'll be an interesting one. And there was one other one. All hot water heaters must be in conditioned spaces now, unless you meet some certain exceptions.
In conditioned spaces.
Conditioned spaces.
that's part of the new code?
Yes.
So that heat pump water heater that is cooling your living space, you're going to be running a furnace to heat that space. Very interesting. Yeah.
Unless you get one of you do make vented units of those too, though, right? So it wouldn't cool the space.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
I mean, they exhaust through the ceiling, but in general, they still cool the space down.
Okay.
So I've heard of people putting them, they have to have a certain amount of free space around them. You can't just shove them in a closet
Right.
like you can an old conventional electric hot water heater. So, and then requiring them to be in the living space, that's going to be, if that is coming to fruition come July, which is, well, usually they're supposed to adopt the codes in July, but based on the lack of progress on approving
Still in
these,
draft form.
I'm really doubting that happens, I guess, at this
Yeah.
point. That's a big question.
Now, I'm curious to know if there's a tankless version of that, so that you're not constantly running the heat pump on it.
Yeah, the problem is our state has now, and state and other places have now taken assault against natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
All of our tankless units are generally natural gas.
Yeah, the electric ones draw a huge amount of power. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to be a good option. It used to be the tankless was the gold standard for, oh no, this is the most efficient.
Yeah.
Not really the case now. And what's a little bit frustrating is that the state's laws, govern a lot of this. And a lot of times they come out with some of these rules, and then the industry has to react. Mm-hmm. The industry is left reeling, going, well, wait, you want us to meet these standards? I can't sell anything that meets those standards. Now we have to come up with a new product, and it's a real scramble sometimes.
Yeah. So someone's real happy for the opportunity to innovate, but it's generally probably not the builder, maybe one of their suppliers. Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like a flavor of the month to a degree.
Yeah.
Well, talking about needing to redesign your home to meet these codes kind of sounds like a good segue into one of the things that we had talked about discussing, which was what do you guys do when someone brings you a set of plans, or what are the advantages and pitfalls to someone, let's say internet shopping for a house plan? And we see it pretty regularly here. You got the basement plan from the Midwest, or you've got the all cinder block house from Southern Florida. Mm-hmm. So you guys must see it all as well. What are some advantages to people to shopping and bringing you a set of plans, and what are some of the disadvantages, and how do you guys work with that?
All right, Chris, handle that one.
I'd say the biggest advantage is you get to pull up a website and scroll through thousands of plans, and you just get to find exactly what you're looking for. The biggest pitfall is exactly what you're saying, is you get a set of plans that may or may not be designed for your local area. So a lot of times we'll get these plans in, and they're designed for 2x4 walls, CMU foundations, all raftered roof, and they want to build it for Northwest standards. So basically what we'll have to do is we'll come in and we'll take just that floor plan, and then we'll redraw the foundation plan for a poured foundation plan, and we'll redraw the framing plans for standard foundation plans, and then we'll send the roof plan over to you and say, help us out, convert this over to a truss roof system. And then we'll just kind of take it from there and then recompile it as a full set of plans that's built to local standards. But yeah, it is definitely a problem when we get those plans in and people think, oh, I'm ready. This is all I need to go. And no, there's actually some changes we need to make the plans to get that to work. And another thing that comes into play is if the owner wants to make any changes to the plan, if they want to move this room over here, move that room over there. Sometimes the contracts, when you purchase those online plans, they may or may not allow you to make changes. So that's another gray area if you get stuck with a plan and your contract says you can't make changes to it. Or if you do want to make changes to it, then you bring it to us, then we're stuck making those changes, and we may have to redraw the whole plan, which is going to add additional cost to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it generally more cost effective for someone to come to you with a sketch and have you draw the plans from scratch? Or?
Yes, definitely more cost effective that way.
Yeah.
And then you're at the end of the day, you just have one set of plans rather than I bought this set and then here's the set I modified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
I think it can depend. So I'll push back on that statement just a little bit. If someone comes to us with a plan that they bought online, and it's not a Midwest or a East Coast plan that has all kinds of things that are wrong with it for our local jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. As long as they're not making wanting to change a bunch of stuff on it, a lot of times we can take that off the shelf plan and just engineer it. And sometimes there are local places where they can find online plans that are designed for trusses and 2x6 walls and R21 walls and a lot of the normal energy information. And then it's fast because it's usually off the shelf. Mm-hmm. It's usually ready to go from the designer. And then we can just jump right into engineering.
Yeah.
So in that case, specific case, it's not more cost effective to come to us and have us draw it from scratch.
Right.
But in general, if someone buys one of those other plans that are East Coast and whatnot, and wants to do a bunch of changes, then it does. At some point, it becomes not cost effective because even if they really like that plan, we can't draw that exact plan for them without making some sort of a change due to copyright laws. Yep. So we can't just copy what somebody else did and redraw it for them. Mm-hmm. It has to be at least noticeably different.
Yeah.
Another issue that comes up with online plans is once it gets into submittal is if any problems come up and plan review comments come back, who's going to be addressing those architectural plan review comments. A lot of times those architectural plan review comments will actually come back to us as the engineers, and we'll address those because they can't get that support from the company that they bought those online plans from.
Right. Okay. So, how would you feel if someone contacted you and said, "Hey, Luke," or "Hey, Chris, I'm looking at this set of plans. I haven't purchased it yet, but I'd like to know, am I better off to purchase this set of plans and have you engineer it, or am I better off to just talk about the elements that I like and have you start from scratch?"
Yeah, I think that happens fairly regularly. A lot of times it's not until after someone's already purchased the plan, which, kind of puts you in a little bit of a pickle. You try to help as much as you can with those situations. But if someone comes to us beforehand, usually the first question is, how well do you like that plan? Like, do you want to just stick with that plan?
And this is you asking them?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm asking the customer, how well do you want to stick to that plan? Because if you really like that, you can just buy the rights to that plan, and then we can change it. We can tweak it or change it for you.
You bet.
At some point, though, and a lot of those changes, if the changes are fairly minor, that means no exterior footprint changes, mostly interior, maybe a little bit of interior wall
windows
type
moving.
stuff. Someone like Chris here, even though he's on the engineering side, he's good at drafting. He can make those changes in CAD.
Yeah.
And we can modify the architectural set to match their changes, and then engineer that, and then they can get a good product or whatever they wanted. They get some customization. They have the rights to the plans. We can make changes to it, and usually at that point, people will go home happy. What happens, what complicates things, is if there's lots of architectural issues to address, like the walls, like insulation, like the roof, and maybe that plan has a very specific look. This is what we oftentimes get involved in.
Yep.
That plan has a very specific look, and guess what? That look changes when you go to trusses.
Right.
It's not feasible to go trusses, and most people in our area will charge a lot more. Most framers will charge a lot more to build a house out of stick 2x rafters and ceiling joists. Plus, it doesn't pencil out as well in our area with a little bit higher snow load, or a significant higher snow load than someplace like Florida or South Carolina or something. And so a lot of times people just don't understand. They don't ever think about that.
Right.
And so that can be problematic. you know.
We dealt with one of those pretty recently where I'm not even sure if in the end we were able to meet the client's desires for the aesthetic on the house and the interior living space. I don't know how that one turned out, but I know that we both had a lot of time into trying to make it what
Trying
the
to
client
make
was
it work.
looking for.
Yeah. That's always a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes it works out.
Right.
Sometimes you guys can make some fancy trusses work, and the customer can get the look they want, and we can still get through engineering on it. But
Yeah, it's no lack of effort, that's for sure.
yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that actually kind of leads pretty well into the next question also, and that is engineered versus prescriptive. And so if someone's bringing a set of plans from somewhere else in the country, that's I don't know if that's so much of a question, but I do hear builders talk about, I prefer working with this home designer because they understand prescriptive path really well, and they'll draw for it. Or I prefer working with an engineer because I know that it's only going to have what it needs in the house and that sort of thing. So what are some advantages to working with prescriptive, advantages to working with engineered? Expand on that a little bit.
I've always looked at it in terms of prescriptive is going to be your very basic house, your basic box, not a lot of flashy design or anything like that. And when you get into an engineered design, you can do whatever you want. Possibilities are endless with an engineered design over the prescriptive design.
It just costs money.
Yeah.
It just costs money. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of times, I may discourage people from doing certain things with their house, but it's usually out of respect of money. How much is this going to cost? How much extra is this going to delay the overall construction of the house? based on the specialty of items of whatever they might need.
Right.
But that said, I think kind of what Chris is saying generally rings true. I think the main advantages to doing prescriptive design would be a time savings. If you have somebody who's willing to draft or can draft and knows the prescriptive code well enough to put the information on the plans so that the jurisdiction, whether it's the county or the city or whoever, has the information they need to approve it, then you save the step of engineering.
Right.
You know, the drafter can design it, and then boom, you're submitting it to the building department. My understanding is the number of people that are willing to do that has dwindled quite a bit.
Yeah.
I know that there's a few. I know that there's a few around us locally and in the Central and Chehalis area that will still do that, and that's a value-added thing that they're able to do for their customers. But you have just all these limitations. There's just limitations all over the place as far as, can't go too high. Can't go too wide. If you get into high snow situations, it's supposed to be engineered. And shops, even shops and barns or whatever, most people don't want those little wing walls in the middle of a 60-foot, 40 by 60 shop.
Right.
If you use prescriptive design, you got to have those wing walls because you can't go more than 35 feet without a brace wall panel.
Right.
And so what's kind of crazy about that is, it's easier to design a house prescriptive than it is a shop, a big open shop, because you can't have big open
Right.
unless you build some sort of interior wall into it. And you can't go, I think it's, is it 10 or 12 feet?
12 for height.
Yeah, for
12.
height. Is it 12?
12, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I can remember actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think if you go over 12 feet for any of your plate heights, it has to be engineered as well.
Right. Is it very common for you guys to engineer only a portion of a structure?
Not very common, no. Occasionally, we will get a request to just engineer a beam or to just do lateral. Most often the case was that it didn't meet the wall bracing requirements for exterior shear walls. They don't call them shear walls when it's prescriptive. It's called a brace wall panel. There's different terminologies for each one even.
Got to be familiar with all that. Yep.
But most common would be the lateral. There'd be something, too many windows, not enough wall bracing, not enough return in the corners, and too short of panels maybe at the garage or whatever, and that would require engineering. But maybe the design had rafters or headers or all that other stuff called out, foundation details, and so it was adequate from the prescriptive standpoint of the gravity, but not the lateral.
I see.
So occasionally we would do lateral engineering only. We would shy away from that on any two-story, because if you have a two-story structure where you're imparting lateral loads into the gravity system, now you got to design the gravity anyways.
Right.
So you might as well just do the whole thing. So at a certain point, there's kind of a stepping off point of where it makes sense. But we, if the county says, hey, all I want is this beam sized, maybe they got a big porch beam or a big living room beam, and that's the only thing that they need, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that for people. I'm not going to make them, go through the whole design process just if the county is okay with just one thing. So
Right.
If we get into more commercial work, a lot of times people buy the pre-manufactured steel buildings, and for those we'll do foundation-only design. The building itself will be pre-engineered by the manufacturer.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you see that some counties require more from you than others, or some jurisdictions are more lenient than others?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. I tend to stay away from Seattle altogether now.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we'd engineer for buildings all the way from Mount Vernon all the way down to Southern Oregon or whatever. I've got a license in Washington and Oregon right now, so could do engineering in either state. And anymore, there are some building jurisdictions that they treat every single family house like just a commercial project, and they want to They want to see where every nail's going. They want to see where every bolt's going, and they want, just a deep dive on things. And it's not a lot of fun to deal with them sometimes,
Right.
because they just nitpick. And usually it's the it's the bigger cities, it's the bigger urban areas that are able then to afford to hire enough staff to look at all this stuff, and they have their own engineers looking at things, or they have a plan reviewer who thinks he's an engineer.
Third-party reviewers are the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it definitely varies a lot just by geographic area.
Yeah.
And if I wanted to market to Seattle, I could, but I don't really desire to cater all of our drawings and our notes and our details to them, because that's what it means.
Yeah.
If you're in an area like that and you want to design for that, then hey, fine, go for it.
Yeah.
But
It sounds kind of like the vehicle equivalent of being California emissions compliant.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So,
I don't want to take and necessarily change how we do everything for one specific region.
right.
And we do have to do that sometimes, just depending on snow loads or depending on high wind. But we're not fundamentally changing how we do things.
Yeah.
And in order to meet some of the onerous requirements of the city of Seattle or places such as that, there's just a lot of headache that it's not worth for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, every company has its ideal client, and your ideal client, it sounds like, isn't building in the city of Seattle right now.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
awesome.
This meal was brought to you by Truss Components of Washington. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next hot dish. And feel free to invite a friend for lunch next time.